So we have here for our guest, our conversation, Sergeant Elenore Sturko, Elle, as she asked to be called, and she's going to answer some questions for us today about her journey in the RCMP and in policing, and her thoughts on life and leadership for our student leaders. So thank you, Elle, Sergeant Sturko, for coming and answering a few questions today. I'm so happy, and the kids are looking forward to doing some reflections on what you have to say later too.
Yeah, a big me.
Oh, I'm excited. So we just a little bit of a background. So you've been a member for 12 years.
Yes.
And you kind of have worked your way across Canada. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, I actually joined the RCMP a little bit later than a lot of my colleagues had started in their 20s, but I didn't start till I was in my 30s. And I'd had a couple of other careers, actually many other jobs even that I had done before joining the RCMP. But I also have a family history in the RCMP, and so it was something that I'd always wanted to pursue. So I joined in 2009, and my first posting after my training was actually in Langley, BC, which was really great, exciting, very good detachment, and I learned a lot about policing through that time. I did general duty there, so going to night calls, having all the fun, doing lots of really interesting things. And then I moved up to the Northwest Territories after that, and then started off doing general duty policing, and then I did police escorts. So because the criminal justice system there is a little bit different than here, there's not jails or courts in every community. So if someone commits a crime and has to be held in custody, we would fly in a police plane all across the Arctic and collect the people, and then fly home to Yellowknife with them and then take them before the court. So really interesting, had a lot of time in that particular job to sit with a lot of like very interesting people and learn a lot of backgrounds and stories of people that came into the criminal justice system. And then after that, my commanding officer of the territory had been looking for a media relations officer. So they asked me if I could help them out, and I started doing that. And I did a media relations officer until 2016, at which time I went over to the RCMP musical ride, which is with the horses and everything. I did that until 2018 when I promoted here to Surrey, and have been the media relations officer here ever since. So
awesome.
love it.
That's really interesting about the differences between working like the urban, we'll get to that maybe a little bit later, but working that urban Surrey versus that remote Arctic experience.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So has your journey gone kind of as you envisioned, and what has been maybe a challenge through your journey in policing that you feel you can share with us?
Yeah, you know what? A lot of people don't know this, but I actually had to apply twice to get into the RCMP.
Oh.
I had applied when I was younger. I was probably like 21 or 22 years old when I applied, and I wasn't accepted. And at the time I was like, stupid RCMP, like totally blaming them. But the reality was at the time, my application wasn't that good. I didn't really put the effort in that I should have, and now I know, now that I am an RCMP officer, and I look back on the effort that I put in and stuff, and I know they made a good choice. I wasn't ready. I wasn't probably mature enough. But I never gave up on that goal. The feedback that I got, I eventually, came around to understanding that, it was all on me, why I wasn't successful at that time. I made some changes, and then eventually, in 2009, I got in. So it wasn't like a clear-cut path. I didn't just graduate and then instantly fall into sort of this dream job that I wanted. It took a lot. And, along the way, especially now with the benefit of hindsight, when you get older and you've been in a job for a while and you start to look back on your life, and a lot of the jobs that I had done early on after high school, and even in high school, I worked in retail, and I worked in a fish and chip shop, and I worked in a slaughterhouse and a dairy and all kinds of different things. But I can see now how a lot of those really different jobs actually helped me a lot in becoming the police officer that I would eventually become. Things like customer service skills, you wouldn't think would be a big part of it, but they really are a huge part of what I do. And then things like working in the slaughterhouse and the dairy. Being from Winnipeg, you may know of Lucerne Dairies. And at the time, I was the first woman that they ever hired to work on the floor of the sour cream factory. Wow. So I worked for a time in the sour cream factory, and I was the only woman. And it was challenging because it was a different culture that I had, like culture, like sour cream culture. No, not like that, but a different culture in terms of just working in with no other girls or women around. And it was a very physical job as well. And I look on that now and at the slaughterhouse and those other sort of non-traditional female jobs.
Yeah.
And policing itself is not always considered a traditional role for women. Women weren't always even allowed to be police officers in Canada. So I think some of the skills and the ability to work with men, the ability to work with all kinds of people actually is something that benefited me now that I'm a police officer. So all these weird and wacky things you're doing now when you're still a teen and you're still in high school and you think like, what is the point of all this? Someday you're going to be like me, you're going to look back and you're going to see how actually collectively all these small experiences can really help you in the future.
Was policing always on your radar when you were growing up, or?
Yeah, so for me, I'm actually like the 7th member of my family to be a member of the RCMP. It started with my great uncle Dave, who joined the RCMP in 1947. And then his 3 other brothers also joined the RCMP. So my grandmother's 4 brothers all were in the RCMP. And then I have some cousins sort of like spin off from that. So growing up and going to like my grandparents and great grandparents' houses, photographs of Mounties being around and the stories and sort of like the folklore of policing, particularly in the Arctic, which is where one of my beloved relatives had started their policing career. That kind of mythology really soaked in, and that idea of the adventure on the fringe and getting to know people in different places really always appealed to me. So yeah, policing's always been on my radar, and especially in terms of getting to know people and going to places I'd never been before.
Yeah, cool. When just to loop back to something you touched on where you didn't get in on your first try. A lot of our kids that are going to be listening to this and thinking about our conversation is they're applying to universities and they're applying for scholarships, but they're applying for universities and they're going to be applying for, their career paths right now. So, it's something that we've talked a little bit about that sometimes you're going to hear no. And to look at that as an opportunity to what your next step might be. So thank you for sharing that, because it's something that we talk about a little bit, and in previous conversation we heard, don't dwell on the no's, but keep working for the yes.
Yeah, and you know what? It hurts a lot.
Yeah.
When I didn't make it to the RCMP for the first time, I thought my dreams were never going to come true. I was devastated by that. But after taking that time of reflection and allowing myself to be upset, it's okay that you're going to be mad because you worked hard and then something doesn't turn out. It's extremely disappointing. And but don't lose hope, and then just sort of appreciate the journey that you're on. Sometimes, like for myself, getting that feedback and then being able to come to terms with the fact that I didn't put the effort in, that was a big lesson for me and something that I've always benefited from now. It's like, no matter what the outcome is of something that you try, as long as you put 100% of your effort into it, you can always be proud of what you've done. And we're not always going to succeed at the things that we do. But as long as you know in your heart you've put in everything that you could, you don't have to have any regrets about that. So
I love that answer. Yeah, thank you. So it sounds, you talked a little bit about your family, of having lots of members in your family, and it sounds like you had a lot of inspiration in your lifetime to follow their path. So tell us a little bit about kind of your inspiration, but what about in kind of mentorship in your life in policing, and what are your thoughts about mentorship and inspiring others within your career in the police?
Yeah, I think mentorship is actually really important. And even if the mentor in your life isn't in the same career path as you, like, it just happens for me that I do have some mentors in my life that are also police officers, but my parents are not police officers. And in my life, my parents have been big mentors for me. And even at the age I'm at now, and in the place in my career that I'm at, I still seek out mentorship and leadership and guidance. So, learning not only from your own mistakes, but being open to the input of others and learning from their mistakes as well. But certainly, I think it really has helped me anyway, seeking out people who interest you, who not only inspire you, but I guess they evoke your curiosity. You want to know about something that they've done, whether it's, even like, oh, how did you hike Machu Picchu? Or, how did you accomplish, writing your dissertation? Or, lots of different things. There's always something to be gathered, not even just from the physical, like, okay, well, I sat down with my computer and I Googled this, but looking like the question you're asking me now, how do people find their inspiration? But it's remarkable to see how much people can accomplish, and those times when you actually feel down, like, I'm never going to be able to get this homework done, or I'm never going to be able to get all these applications done in time. You're not alone. There's other people out there that have gone through the same thing, and there is value in reaching out to those other people to find out where the strengths can be drawn from, and tips on how to make things easier. I think one of the things that's really sparked my imagination lately and helps me do my job now I wouldn't say it's any particular person, but what happened in 2020 with all the social justice and that we're seeing, and opportunities for more voices to be heard in terms of conversations about racism and about colonization and about racial bias and stuff, really it inspires me to look at the way in which I do my work now. And I look towards other people in the community to see what their experiences are, and then draw from those to navigate my way into the future. That all sound really crazy what I was saying, but
No,
there's a lot.
And
I hope that young people in your group, it doesn't have to be a famous person. It doesn't have to be someone that has their doctorate, or it can, anyone is capable of teaching you something. There's just so many powerful things to be learned, even from a peer, that it's worth reaching out, networking, and having those connections.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. I love that term of networking. And the more people you know, and the more you're a sponge in life, it's just going to benefit you.
100%.
And it's like, and then, the whole sponge metaphor is great because you can wring out what you don't like and keep what you do. Right? One of the things that we study as part of our class is leadership styles. And so we look at everything from being the people person leader to the democratic leader, and asking how everybody feels. And, we think, and we learn that, structures like policing or the military perhaps are very, can be autocratic and very rank based in terms of position. Therefore, your leadership is very much rank based in that. So can you offer some thoughts about leadership within a hierarchy, a structure such as your career path where things are rank based, and your thoughts on leadership styles?
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting question, actually, because here we actually talk about that a lot. And it is true that we do have a rank-based structure. But I think, and I was previously in the military too, so I'm used to the rank-based structure. But I think a lot of things, even if you think about yourself working in a project group at school or in your university going forward, or in your career, regardless of what it is, there will always be decision makers in every group. It just happens to be that in our system, we assign titles, ranks, sergeant, corporal, inspector, to the different levels of decision making. I think sometimes people associate our paramilitary structure with maybe an absence of things like creativity, or that you're not allowed at a lower level to have as much input because your rank is lower. But it's actually not the case. I learned a really big lesson when I was in the military. Actually, I was in basic training, and we were in a classroom, and this really crazed sergeant came in and slammed a paste stick on the table and said, if you think this is the place for you to turn your mind off and just take orders, then you're wrong. Just get out. And he was just, yelling at us all, and just like the movies, just jacking up and making you scared. But he just said, this is a place for creativity. Because yes, you may be ordered to solve a problem, but how you solve that problem comes from within you. And that one of the things that actually taught me, and this is sort of my leadership philosophy, is that I don't expect every person to be equal. It doesn't mean that I don't expect, to provide equity to my employees or people that I work with. But what it means is that I value people uniquely. So I'm not looking for everyone to make the exact same contribution, because I don't think that that's realistic. I think that everyone is going to contribute in their own unique way. And how that was really exampled for me in the military was that we had people from all walks of life in a troop together. So you had people who had not graduated high school, and you had people who were PhDs and stuff working together. You had people who were very handy at, things like electrician work or, carpentry. And then you had, so the point was, is that, yes, you might have someone that's better at reading maps and navigating or assembling a computer system, but there's also value in the person that can build a shelter. There's value in a person that can dig a hole for you to hide in. So each person has something to contribute, and you have the real skill, and the real valuable leadership comes from your ability to recognize that everyone has that opportunity to contribute uniquely and find a way of bringing all those unique pieces together to form something really great. Separately, we all have something, and together, if you find a way to put that puzzle together, you can create something really good and really strong. And so to put it into something you can relate to, like think about when you're assigned in a project group, and you always feel like one person's doing all the writing, one person's doing, maybe one person's doing all the snacking and playing on their iPad. I don't know, but each person is going to be different. In the beginning of my police career, I found it very frustrating at times when I felt like, oh, my output was maybe more than X, Y, and Z. And I felt like I was unfairly burdened, because I felt like I was maybe doing more than someone else. But the reality is that I might have taken files, but the other person was doing fewer files that were more complex than I was doing because they had different experiences. So we're not always going to be equal in life in terms of our output. We definitely all have value.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that's the reality for these kids. And, finding those roles within their different groups, and they're going to go to university, and some of them are going to go into trade school, and some of them are going to do, just go straight to a job, and where they have to work with people, and understanding those different leadership styles is important. So thank you for sharing that. And it's nice to hear that an organization that, yes, while technically has ranks and titles, that they do encourage the communication from top to bottom, and the collaboration and spirit with it.
The reality is that leadership comes at every level.
Yes.
If you are a person who is going to take charge of the situation, regardless of what it is, you are a leader. Yeah. So anyone has the power to do that. And even within a rank structure like ours, anyone who has a badge in the RCMP is expected to be a leader. Yeah. So we're making sometimes tough decisions. And so, we all have that opportunity. So I think that even if you don't go into like a policing career like me, you'll find that there is a rank structure even without the titles in a lot of jobs that we do. There's always boss managers, co-workers and stuff like that.
And sometimes it comes down to, as we learn too, that it comes down to personality styles, that, introverts can be leaders too.
100%. Yeah. So, they just like inside there.
Yeah, that's right. I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm just going to skip ahead to a question. And, you're very much a proud member of the LGBTQ society and community in the world and policing. And you're a woman who's been, as we talked about, in a predominantly male career path. And so, a lot of kids had questions about how have you dealt with barriers around in any part of that, whether it's gender-based or identity-based, as in your journey in policing, but even in the military, or things that you've kind of worked your way through?
I think a lot of it comes from being a determined person, to be honest. We all can draw from our inner strengths, and the other part of it goes back to that networking. Pardon me. Surround yourself with supportive people, and in the workplace, find allies when you can. Keep your friend network, keep a close family network if you can, because there will be tough days in your road ahead, regardless of your career path or journey that you take. So, for myself, I feel lucky because I actually don't feel that I have had many barriers in my way. And I've always worked really hard when I have seen something at work maybe that I thought was bias, or I thought something was not equitable, that I've always, regardless of my rank, actually brought those things forward, but also brought forward solutions. keep the lines of communication open with not just my coworkers, but also with managers that I've had in the past, because, the truth is that sometimes, especially when we're dealing in institutions that are have been built with some bias in them, if we don't bring forward those biases and communicate and develop solutions for them from within, no one's going to do it for us. So, my life actually, and I could go on for hours about this, so it'll have to be another interview, but in terms of my history with the LGBT, and my uncle had actually been fired from the RCMP for being gay. And now here I am gay and I'm the spokesperson for the RCMP. It just shows this progression. Society has changed a lot. And fortunately for me, a lot of the discrimination and the practices of and legislation that was discriminatory was removed, or at least some of those restrictions eased, by the time I ever entered my policing career. My life has been impacted by a lot of legislative changes over my lifetime, from women being allowed in the RCMP, marriage being extended to include people of same-sex couples. So I'm married, and then I also have children, and my spouse Melissa and I are both legal parents to our children. So all of these cultural changes within Canada have directly impacted me. And now, knowing that I actually sit in a place of privilege and I have an opportunity, like people like you are interested to know what I say. So use these opportunities. I'm not shy about speaking about my family's history, and I take this chance to listen to what questions you're asking me as well, what your students have submitted, and I not only look to answer them in this interview, but I think on them. And when I'm developing now messages for the Surrey RCMP, or if I'm providing advice to our chief of police, I say, this is what young people care about. This is what they're asking me about. So how can we look at their concerns and bring them into our police force so that we're meeting their needs? So, being out and having the opportunity for you to now ask me about, gender, and about the LGBT community within policing is important. And I guess that's why I've been out ever since I've been in the RCMP. And I always figured if there was any issue or problem, that I was prepared to face that head on, so that I can make things better for the people that come after me.
And I think that's important. I think one of the questions that came, the context of even why we're doing these interviews is 75% of my kids, and student leaders across Canada actually, is female right now. And if I were to go to a Canadian student leadership conference, it would be 75% young women. And so our leaders of the future are women, and they're putting themselves out there to be leaders and putting their hand up to say, I'm here, choose me. So I'm happy that you said yes to this, because I want them to look and see people that they can just think, say, you know what, that person's like me and I can do that.
Awesome. Well, I hope they do come do this. Come work with me.
Yeah. And, there was another part of the question too, is, what advice would you give to a young first-year constable, L. Sturko, starting in the RCMP now, 12 years later? And what advice would you give to other young people struggling with maybe coming out to friends and family in their own life?
Yeah, so for the policing question, advice to myself, I was thinking on that, I guess, in a context of, would I do anything differently? And the truth is that I probably wouldn't. It's not that I didn't make mistakes. I've made mistakes, and it's not that things at times weren't challenging, or that I had to work hard to learn, my trade. But that's all part of it, and I have no regrets on that. So I always encourage people to still network. I wish I had been more confident and reached out to more people, I guess, earlier on in my career. I think that would have made some of the learning a little bit easier if I had been more confident and reached out earlier. So the mentors I now have. And then with the, coming out stuff, for me, I'm lucky because I was well supported. It wasn't easy. And often people think about coming out stories as being sort of like the one day that you came out and told. Coming out for me was more of a process of many years of, first of all, learning to accept myself and really know who I was or who I was becoming as a person and grow into my identity, and accept myself. And it got to a point too, because I was very fearful that my family wouldn't accept me, that I was like, well, regardless of what other people think, I need to do this for me. So I surrounded myself with people who accepted me. I had a good friend group. And at the time, this is like 25 years ago. So there was not like Gay Straight Alliance, or, I lived at the time in Kamloops, and there was like no gay bars or, and no LGBT literature section in the library. So uh, I felt alone a lot of it. I didn't know any other gay students at the time I was in high school. It wasn't until after high school that I had met a few people. But when I did finally come out, I did surround myself with supportive people. And then I was fortunate that my parents were supportive as well, my sisters and my brother. But I know that's not the case for everybody. And so I would say, use the resources that are available. And you know what? There are people like myself. I'm always open. My colleagues will tell you that regardless of the kind of email that comes in, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I always respond. I respond to emails, to phone calls. I've had people call here because they saw that I was a LGBT cop and they wanted to ask me questions, and I'm fine with it. So reach out to resources in the community. Reach out to your Gay Straight Alliance. Have that support for yourself, and develop a strategy that works for you, and just take your time. The reality is there's no rush to come out, and you don't have to go on anyone's timeline but your own. And that's for anything in life. And I remember someone asked me, about if I ever, had any doubts and about myself, or was self-doubting. And the reality is, I think for most people, you'll go through several periods of time in your life when you'll have doubts or maybe not feel confident. I didn't feel confident before I came out. I worried that my family wouldn't accept me. And then I didn't feel confident. Like when I had my kids, I didn't know if I'd be a good mother. I had those doubts about myself. And again, it was important for me to reach out for mentorship. Like my grandmother and my mother were always there for me when I had questions about parenting. And likewise, reaching out to these LGBT groups and support networks and ally networks and Gay Straight Alliances. When you have doubts and questions, they will be able to put you in touch with someone that can also help you get through those times when you doubt yourself. So
awesome. Well, thank you for that, because it's important. And we work with these young leaders, but they're still learning, right? They're still 15 and 17, and they're finding their way in life. And to have role models like yourself is important.
It's not easy. It's not easy. Even with all the benefits of having a more open society today, it's still not easy, because we all feel the expectations of traditional, traditional relationships, I would say, and traditional expectations. And, but fortunately now there's a lot of examples out there to follow, I think.
I love it. I have one question left, just in terms of being respectful of your time again. We talked a little bit about our why and our purpose, and you've shared that. Would you have any advice for young leaders in Surrey? I mean, you work in Surrey, you are a community, you're a heavy presence in the community in your job as a police officer, but also working with all aspects of the community with media. So at Fleetwood Park and in Surrey School District, we have a lot of really amazing young student leaders. So do you have any last bits of advice that might link to our community and what you would
I do. And I have a story. This advice comes in a story, if that's okay. Absolutely. It's that in 2019, it was the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the decriminalization of homosexuality. And it was also here in Surrey, the 20th anniversary of Surrey Pride. And our RCMP detachment had never raised the Pride flag previously. So we had decided that, I had actually pitched the idea. I said, hey, to our Sergeant Major, Shane Stover, and I said, hey, listen, let's ask the officer in charge, our chief of police, if we can raise the Pride flag. If there was ever a time, this is the best time, because, the 50th anniversary and all this stuff. And I had been also invited that year to attend an international policing conference for LGBTQ2SI police. And so I was like really feeling the pride, so they agreed. They thought it was a great idea. I flew off to this conference, and while I was gone, I got a text message that was actually telling me that there was a briefing note, that there was going to be a protest at the RCMP detachment. And they were protesting the raising of the pride flag. And also that there was some threats, and that they were saying that if we didn't not put up the pride flag, that there would be possibly some violence. So I read that, and I was not at home. I was at a hotel. I was in Toronto. I read it and I freaked out. I just felt awful. And I was just immediately so worried. I don't want anyone to get hurt. They asked me, do you think this will be a big deal? No one's gonna, I said, no, pride flags have been going up for like decades. No one even cares. Like, it's just gonna be so fun. We'll invite some guests and stuff. And of course, then the briefing note showed that this actually was not the case. So I sent a text message to our officer in charge at the time, Dwayne McDonald, because I felt terrible. And I just texted him. I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Dwayne, I never meant for this to happen. And I sent it, and like 2 seconds later, my phone started ringing, and I picked it up, and it was him. It was Dwayne. And he's like, Elle, I'm like, you don't have anything to apologize for. He's like, listen, I talked to the commissioner of the RCMP this morning. You talked to the commissioner of the RCMP. That's our boss in Ottawa, right? And I was like, oh, good heavens, like now I'm like thinking, like, not only am I on the, trouble list for the local RCMP, but now I'm also on the turd list for the Ottawa National RCMP. Knows that I'm a troublemaker. And if I didn't look in the mirror, but I'm sure I was probably white as a sheet. And he just said, listen, no, I talked to her, and she said, yes, I know about the protest that's planned, but listen, go ahead. Of course you're going to raise the flag. We're not going to let someone bully us. This is the right thing to do. And it's our chance to show leadership in the community. Anyway, so a couple of days pass and I'm home again, and it's our flag raising, and there was a protest here. And it was one of the most intense times for me. I never actually experienced that much hatred, certainly not in the last 25 years since I'd come out. But we had a lot of supporters there as well. Our members that were here, a lot of people participated, and I was very proud that day. Proud that the RCMP stood up for the LGBTQ2SI employees and officers of our community too, to show the community, like, no, we don't back down to hate. This is the police of all the people of Surrey. And what that, the whole thing is that for me, it was a powerful example of adversity, and that facing adversity is your chance to shine. And so my advice is, don't be afraid of adversity. Don't be afraid of things that are extremely challenging, because that is your chance to show leadership. It's your chance to show everybody what you're made of, and to test your mettle, and to show them your values and ethics. So that was a really scary day for me. It was one where I felt like I had done wrong, but honestly, it was one of the most powerful lessons of my life. And that to me is fundamental. When you go forward, things are not going to be easy. There's going to be times when you honestly feel like you've really done it and you've dug yourself a deep hole. And that's your chance to show people what a climber you are, how well you do, and everything that you're made of. So that's I
love it. And I love this story about our community, because Surrey is a special place.
It is.
I love working in this community, and I love our school. I love all aspects of our cultures, our multiculturalism in this community. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been great.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time, and you're giving advice to our student leaders, and on their behalf, I'd just like to say thank you very much.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to reach out.
Okay,
So
I'll
I'm there.
definitely pass that along. Sergeant Sturko, thank you very much.
Thank you.